Welcome to another episode of Break Away from the Rat Race. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Max Keller. Max is a fantastic individual, is very dynamic. He's also a real estate investor, best-selling author, and highly sought-after speaker. He's also worked on various panels as an expert in real estate, especially on the topic of lead generation and marketing for you real estate investors out there. Max, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Excited.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, because I know that you used to be a school math teacher. So I'd like kind of give you a background and a flavor of who Max is to the listeners out there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I before I got into real estate, I actually wanted to get into real estate back in 2005. I just gotten married. I was 25 at the time. I'm 40 now at the time of this recording. And problem was in 2005 was I wasn't really as coachable. I didn't read a lot and I didn't really have a plan. I was kind of just bouncing around to, different boot camps and different trainings. And I set up an LLC, which has nothing to do with lead generation, which is most of what deal making actually is. So I just kind of didn't know what I was doing. And so it kind of fizzled out. My wife's a teacher. I became a teacher. And worked for 7 years as a teacher. And I actually loved teaching. I got my master's in it. Every day was like heaven on earth. And that's coming from teaching middle school, which there are not a lot of people teaching middle school saying that, but I love it. And actually, so when I got into real estate, I didn't plan on going full time. I saw real estate as a vehicle for passive income growth. See, my pay was pretty much locked in. I worked for the state. Or the city, but it's state government money and It's locked in. And I'm like, I got to do something. My family was growing and, the kids would get more expensive and my wife worked at our church. So, we put together the money. It's enough to get by, but I wanted to do more than get by. So I looked at real estate. My goal initially was just to maybe get like 1 or 2 rentals a year. I was a pretty good saver at the time. I went through like Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University. and I started teaching it at my church. So I'm really into that and I was getting the benefits. So I started looking for deals with that idea. I would just get a couple rentals. I'd be bankable because my credit was good and I'd have a job and I would just get some rentals and basically just, pay them off. And then I'd be able to, my daughters get married. I can give them a house to live in or, just maybe something for some income for them. So that was the whole mindset. That was 2015. But what happened was I kind of got the real estate bug and I really enjoyed it. And pretty quickly I got a couple of deals under contract within about 6 months of starting. Sold one for a $16,000 wholesale fee, which is about 4 months of teacher pay. So I was like, hold the phone. And I just thought it's a good way to make active income too. And if you know what you're doing, but as I discovered, it's the most important component of being an active real estate investor for me was the marketing and really having that dialed in. And so I've kind of gone through a journey through my marketing and, I'll kind of share with your audience, why that's so important and what happens if you get it wrong.
Yeah. So I think this is very interesting. And I think this is why I think your profile fits so well with a lot of the investors that I talk to. They're working full time. They don't have time to go and look for other deals. And then, I keep preaching about, the number one goal should be achieving financial freedom and start working on it now. And then, so the easiest thing to get into is having like a single family rental. It's pretty easy to understand. There's no special kind of magic numbers or special formula. You buy a house, you look at how much it costs, and as long as your rent is higher than that, you're good to go. You have positive cash flow, and then you can build on that.
Right.
So this is very good. And this is kind of my recommendation for people that, okay, let's get started. Let's start building that passive income. And I'm not saying that just because, you should be doing that forever, because a lot of time people are saying, well, I'm interested also in multifamily and I want to flip my house. So I don't want to do turnkey. My thing is that just get started in the turnkey, achieve enough passive income so that you have more freedom with your time and with your money, and then you can go in to these more time consuming deals like flipping, like all of that. And one of the things that you found was lead generation. So tell us about that. Tell us about how you got started with the lead generation and how that how did you evolve that into more like a marketing, I would say, right?
Right. Yeah. So, starting in 2015, it was just, we're coming out of the downturn and I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. There's a lot of people moving here. And so, we could do, pretty much traditional methods that have been around a long time and get a good ROI on our marketing. And so, but around 2017, things started to kind of tilt. And around that time, I was literally trying every single kind of motivated seller marketing there was. I was sending out, yellow letters and postcards and bandit signs, and I had cold callers. I was doing everything, and what I found is it was really frustrating because I was working full time capacity, to get these leads, and every campaign that I sent out, I was just getting less and less response. And, probably a lot of people feeling that way, especially now as we fast forward 4 years later. So I knew I had to do something a little bit different. So what I decided to do, because I was in the active investing space, is I said, instead of just trying to like help everybody, who's really an ideal fit for me? Maybe if I can narrow down the fit, narrow down the message, narrow down the budget, and just do better marketing with a smaller group of folks, that I'll have better results. And that's exactly what happened. I found that the people I wanted to work with as an active investor are folks, first of all, I want to do high profit deals. I didn't want to do deals that were skinny because they take about the same amount of time, but you don't make as much.
Yeah.
I wanted to work with people. I go over to people's houses and I'd show them the comps, comparable sales in their neighborhood, and they would argue with me, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And I'm just like, I want to work with somebody that sees me as the expert, the consultant, not just another dime a dozen, real estate investor. And then, obviously I wanted to work with people that I enjoyed working with. I was working, some of these motivated sellers are really struggling, and I had to go and bail people out of jail to get them to the closing, and just
Oh
stuff
my God, really?
oh, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's like nothing. That's nothing. That's
Oh
kindergarten.
my God.
So I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to just work with just nice people that just need help and want to walk through this. Just like you do in your business, and probably everybody does in any business that you're in. So what I found for me was most of my deals didn't meet all three of those criteria, but the ones that did, you don't have to be, a math teacher to figure out the pattern. They were senior citizens. And so as I dug deeper in my list, I noticed that these seniors, they weren't coming from my normal marketing campaigns. They were referrals. Sometimes their kids were driving in our neighborhood and they would see us rehabbing a house. And when I would make an offer on their house, I wasn't always the highest price.
Yeah.
And so I called one of the sellers and I asked them, this seller got like 2 offers from folks, $10,000 more. And, on $100,000 offer for an old house, I mean, that's a big percentage. And I just asked him, I said, why is it that you're working with me? And there's a big time lesson in here. Because if you're always thinking, if you're a passive investor, what's the highest yield no matter what? Sometimes there's a catch. Or if you're trying to do deals and you're like, or buy something, it's like, what's the cheapest thing possible? Sometimes there's a catch. These folks knew that. And they said, the reason that we took your offer that was 10 grand less is because basically just because I gave them the things that they actually cared about. And they wanted a fair price, but they didn't want the lowest price for their home. They cared that I explained everything to them. I took extra time, that I genuinely actually, was there, like wanting to help them. They liked it that I was telling them about options that didn't point to me. And I was like, if that's a better fit for you, then I can introduce you to somebody. They really wanted like a trusted guide. And so I was like, well, that's good. So I kept doing that. I just focused on working with seniors. I was a little nervous at first because I thought, oh, well, I'm not getting as many deals as I want now. And now I'm working with an even smaller group of people. I'll have less deals. But actually the total opposite happened because I was speaking exactly to what was going on with them. And so I was getting known pretty well as like the senior housing guy in my area. But then next thing that happened was totally unexpected, and it changed the way that I market, forever. And what happened was I was at a house in Richland Hills, Texas, and I helped the the dad sell the home. He moved into like a retirement community, and his kids were there. His kids were like in their, I think the maybe late 40s to early 60s. And some of them were crying, the family house is getting sold, all the memories. And there's a lot going on. There's a huge transition of real estate that's happening right now with this group of people.
Absolutely.
And so anyways, the one of the ladies there, kind of the head, kiddo that was running everything, said, you've helped our family out a ton. Have you ever thought about, a lot about this. Have you ever thought about you should write a book about it? And then I was like, a book? Like, no, I don't think so. I'm dyslexic. There's no way I'm writing a book. That doesn't make any sense. But then I thought about it. And I was like, it's a pretty good idea. I was getting asked the same questions over and over and over again. So I could take those, and instead of just be the guy who, knows a lot about senior housing, I could be the guy who knows a lot and wrote the book on senior housing. So I just wrote a book with all the questions people are asking me, all the questions that, people should ask, and pros and cons of all the options that are out there. And I just laid it all out there. And that was my first book, Home to Home, the step-by-step senior housing guide. I created a workshop, and I started just sharing it, using it as my business card and passing it out to people. And it had a huge impact, because I found a group of people, not everybody, but there's a segment of people, that's really what they really wanted. They wanted some education. They wanted to actually understand what their options were from somebody they saw as like an unbiased, foundational source. And so, and then it just sort of evolved from there. And then it turned into, then we wrote a book to our private money lenders, because, once you have money, then our deals, and you need, more money for the deals, obviously. And so I was answering the same questions with those folks. And then, so we wrote a book on all the questions that, people really do need to know and need to be asking before they invest passively in a deal, because we do that too. And it just sort of evolved from there. And then we can talk some specifics and ninja stuff that we're doing, but marketing is key. Without it, active investing's no go. But working with somebody that can answer your questions, whether they have a book or not, is what most people are looking for. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you mentioned that I really like. Is that, first of all, is that when you're dealing with people, a lot of the focus is always around the money and stuff like that. And it's just like, but this is not all that matters, right? So people are willing to take $10,000 less for their house because you help them with something, you provide information, you guide them, you sound better, you sound more trustworthy, you can work, you're more flexible in terms of when they can move out or something like that. There's a lot of other stuff around the deal that people tend to forget and tend to ignore, because it's much easier to focus on the mass and then just go and say, okay, well, if that doesn't work, then I'll just move on to the next one. But you can sometimes spend a little bit of time to try to understand what the seller wants, and then kind of like make a deal that makes sense for them and makes sense for you.
Yeah, for us, it was about creating an apples to oranges offer that nobody could compare us to, because, when everybody's doing the same thing, that it just, is about price. But when we position ourselves as trusted expert and an author, it was about making the transition from, being a annoying pest salesperson to a welcomed guest, trusted advisor. And then it turned into this whole licensing program. So now active investors all over the nation, we have 4 book systems, and we figured out a licensing program where people can basically just, we customize the book, keep most of it the same. And they put their face on it, that we write their story in it, and then they give it out in their local area. And it was actually, because I'm really into financial literacy too, because I saw that a lot in working in math, and we get to 8th, 9th grade, they started in our state introducing financial literacy. And the first chapter was about how to use a credit card, and I was like, oh geez, so it's a little bit rigged. But I really got a lot out of the Dave Ramsey financial peace stuff. And here's what I noticed is there wasn't something like that for housing. What was happening is people don't buy a house or sell a house very often in America, and so when they would try to figure out their options, they just kept reaching out to a straight commission salesperson who only told them about their option. And so I was like, what if we were seeing, and now our licensees, we have about 140 investors across the nation that license one of our books. I was like, well, what if we could be, so that was the model. It was like the Dave Ramsey model. That's where I got a lot of inspiration from it. When I created the workbook, was to do workshops. And so right now at this moment, we have over 100 investors across the nation that are doing workshops, and they're speaking to local groups, and they're giving them their workbook, and they're working through stuff, and so like, that's really, it's been good. It's been a lot of fun. And I would just say, if you're thinking about active investing, marketing is the number one thing. And if you have that dialed in correctly, you can make a great chunks of money. But if you don't, you'll make no money and waste your time. If you don't have the time to dedicate to the marketing and you go passive, work with somebody that's going to answer your questions. Work with somebody that's really looking at it. People don't like it when they feel like somebody's just peddling to them. They're not really listening. Like, not everybody that calls us should be a fit. Like, that's impossible. So it's sort of like that, but that's just sort of our mantra, and something to watch out for when you're doing your investing.
Yeah, I think this is great too. And finding the right audience, something that you resonate with, but also becoming the expert. I mean, we did when we started investing, we actually tried to start to do flips in San Francisco Bay Area, and so we did the normal campaign and all of that, nothing extravagant, spent a lot of money, and then got a couple of leads here and there. But you had to be, you have to have the right conversation. You would talk to one person that would be responding to your ad, and then it's one type of conversation. Somebody that's about to go in foreclosure or something like that, and it's okay, now you have to be an expert in preventing somebody to go in foreclosure. Somebody was underwater. Well, in San Francisco, that didn't happen very often to be underwater, but in other markets that we did it, we ended up in underwater, or people that didn't have that owed property taxes and stuff like that. We also did what's the thing about people when people pass away, and the probate. That's it. So we did probate as well, and that's another completely different conversation, and very delicate conversation. And also the timing is important, and when you want to have that conversation. So, and again, from you, like you focused on the senior housing. I think this is, and then you focus on that conversation, and you can easily target that market, I guess. I mean, we're going to talk in a moment about kind of like your ninja skills for reaching your market or other market. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, this is phenomenal. This is a group that you can easily target by looking at the owner and blah, 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 and what age group they're in and kind of what stage they're at. And then it's a similar conversation. You can be expert at the concerns and the questions that particular population has. So I think that's a phenomenal, I think, niche that you found. And so let's talk about that, and let's talk about some of the ninja skills that you've developed to reach that market and have these, help that group of people.
Well, the first part is to not look like everybody else. So if most people are sending out, a general benefit statement that's just saying, we'll buy your house quickly and for cash. Well, that's apples to apples. Everybody's seen that a million times. And the problem with that message is that it's talking about the company, not the pain and hopefully solution that the customer is experiencing. So the who is really the most important part of marketing. That's if you get the who right, everything else is right. And because I've had these conversations with the seniors. I know exactly what their top 10 biggest worries are, their biggest fears are, what their secret desires are. And I put that in my copy. But most importantly, just to keep it real easy, is when I got my book, when I first started my book, I was just passing it out to everybody, and they call me, they never throw it away. I mean, they put the book on the coffee table. They don't throw it in the trash, on and on and on. But the first thing I did was I just added my book as a transitional call to action. See, most people that you reach out to, they're not ready to sell their house yet. So what we do is we just say, hey, if you're not ready to sell your house yet, instead of save our postcard, which most people don't do if they're getting 100 a week, we just say, if you're not ready to sell your house yet, you can give our office a call. We just wrote this new book, the step-by-step senior housing guide. It's $12.99 online, but if you call our office, we'll send you a free copy. Well, that's something that's real, that's valuable. So when we just started doing that, our response rate went from 1% to 3%. Now, not all of those additional, that's a 300% increase. Now, not all of those people immediately sold us the house, but marketing is about trust, and it's about having a conversation. And so what the book did was it made it easier for people to feel comfortable with us to just talk and have a conversation, because we were already, sometimes people think like when they call XYZ is going to happen, even though that's not what's going to happen, but that's what's in their head. It's negative. Like, oh, they're just going to give me a sales pitch, so they don't call. But for us, we're just saying call for the free book. And then the kind of second thing that we did at the very beginning was we get phone calls from people and they say, hey, I got some of your marketing and I want to, sell my house. So, but I want to sell it like right now. So come over right now. And, we felt like we had to race over to the house real quick before somebody else did. So now we say, whoa, hold on just a second, tap the brakes. We have to make sure if we can work with you. And they're just like, excuse me, because they think they're the pretty girl that's getting 100 people a week asking them to go to the prom. That's all the mail they're getting. So they're like, I've got the cheese, and if you want this cheese, come over and you're going to have to pay me for it, and we're going to do something called a win-lose, which is I'm going to win because it's a hot market and you're going to lose because you're a sucker. And they don't say that, but that's sort of their attitude. So how we deflate that immediately is we just say in totally respectful way, hey, have you gotten a copy of our newest book yet? And they're like, your book, what? And they like get all confused because they're not calling anybody else that has a book. And I say, I go, here's the deal. Chapter 3 is all the ways to sell your house. So I tell them the book, it's home to home, step-by-step senior housing guide, but you don't have to be a senior to get a benefit from it. Chapter 3 is all the ways to sell your house, pros and cons of each. If you make a mistake, it can cost you thousands. I don't want you to rush into anything and experience that. If I send you an autographed, couriered copy of the book to your house today, will you be able to read chapter 3 before I come over? Because if you can, then I'll come over. And if I can't, then I just can't come over, because that's how it works. This is my process. I'm the expert here. And so she goes, or he goes like, well, it's 100% yes, because nobody's ever sent them an autographed copy of their book before. And then here's the best part. I don't have to race over there. And I asked him, I said, okay, is like the bulldozer coming to tear down the house? Like, is it really 911? And they're like, kind of coy. They're like, no. And I'm like, right. I go, okay, well, what if I come over in a couple of days? Is that okay? Because I want to have enough time to do some research on the house so that, when I come over, I actually have something to show you, and they're like, and so what it did was it changes the whole control. So even though we're in a seller's market, that's a hot market, people call us and a lot of times exclusively work with us and wait until to see what we can do for them. Like I've never, when I go over to the houses, since I've done the book marketing about almost 4 years now, I've never had somebody sell the house before I get over there. Now, not everybody sells me the house, but at least now I don't have to race out. But here's the best part. Here's the ninja. When I go over there, guess what? They didn't just read chapter 3. They read all the other chapters. They saw the picture of me and my Momo, my grandma took care of, and they read my story, and they've learned a lot. And I didn't have to be there. It's scalable. So now when I'm going over to the house, I'm working with somebody who's already pre-qualified on working with me. And having somebody that's pre-qualified just to work with you, whatever your business is, I mean, this is something that any business owner should consider. It's one of the most powerful tools I've ever found in marketing. And it helps them, it gives them a lot of value, and it lets them know if I'm not a good fit. So it's like everybody wins. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And also I don't know if you read the book, like Influence, but one of the things they talk about in there, like in the early chapters, is giving something to somebody, kind of like it changed the relationship already. They feel like, okay, but you're giving me something, I need to at least give you a chance, or or listen to you, or something like that. They feel that they have to reciprocate in some way, not necessarily by selling you the house, but at least give you a chance, an opportunity. So even if somebody else comes in and say, I want to buy your house today, and I want to say, well, Well, no, but I want to make sure that I talk to this person first, and he's going to come in 2 weeks, and then I'll make a decision. Or no, 2 days, and I'll make a decision.
Yeah.
So I think it's brilliant. I think this is it's excellent strategy. Obviously, it's working, but
Really
yeah,
good. It's
yeah.
good. You know,
So
kind of the layer that we put on top of it is because I would love to get on here and go, oh yeah, this was my plan all along. I knew this was going to happen. I got the idea from Motivated Sellers, you know, adult daughter. And then I'd say, oh yeah, I knew that I would be able to crush all this marketing stuff with it. I didn't know. I knew this was going to happen. I was figuring it out for the first year. I remember going over this one house as a senior lady, but still totally with it. Not really that old, just old enough to move to like a 55 and up. And which I mean, shit, it's like going to be me around the corner. I mean, it happens fast. And I go, and it's going to happen to everybody. And right now,
yeah,
you know, the fastest growing age group in America is 85 and up,
yeah,
4,000 people a day. And then the second fastest is 65 and up, 10,000 a day. So I felt good because every time I looked at the data, I was like, man, I'm positioning and marketing and being an expert in the fastest growing group of people that when they
yeah,
get older, they need to sell their house. So I was at this one lady's house in particular. I remember this so clear. And one of the questions we asked on our checklist is, who else are you considering selling the home to? And I always hated asking that question because I was like, what if they had never thought of that possibility, which, you know, they've already thought of that a million times. So just ask
mhm,
it, get the info. And she goes, well, nobody. And I was like, well, I'm okay with that. But like, can I ask why? Because I mean, surely there's like, you know, of, or there's a million other people that you could also sell your house to. And I mean, I believe I'm the best, but you know, we both have to believe that. So I'm
yeah,
just, why is that? You know? And she said, well, here's the deal. Actually, before I called you and found out about you, I called a bunch of other people and they were going to come over. But then once I found out about you and I got your book, I called them back and told them not to come over anymore. And then I had a list of people after you that I was going to call. But why would I call those people and have them come over when in my living room, I already have the person who wrote the book on the subject?
yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, oh snap, we figured
yeah,
something out here, you know. And it
yeah,
was, what's cool is we win, but we figured it out not because we were like trying to tap into the law of reciprocity and manipulate their minds and all this stuff.
yeah,
We just really, I was just sitting in these 1978, you know, Sears catalog like flower couches for 4 hours answering the same questions over and over again. And I don't mind doing it because it's fun. I like hanging out with seniors. You know, I took care of my grandma. She took care of me. So I'm used to that. But I was like, this isn't very scalable. And so now I can just give out 100 of my books a month. And, you know, it equates to, you know, 400 hours of
yeah,
conversations that are
mhm,
happening. And I don't have to be there. So it's a very scalable way to, you know,
yeah.
help people and help me.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about also kind of the kind of like what are the top fears from seniors and stuff like that. So what are some examples of that?
Seniors are most of the folks are worried about there's kind of two questions going on in most senior homeowners' minds. Like the song, should I stay or should I go? So they've got the you know, their house, if it's running into some maintenance and it's older, they've been just kind of patching it together and it's stressful. They don't have the physical capacity maybe to work on it like they used to when they were 40. And so, but they want to hold on to it. There's sentimental reasons. But the number one thing is they want to hold on to their independence. They're scared that when they leave the house, if they leave the house, they're signaling that we're on a downward slope and we're heading to, you know, death's doorstop. And like if
Mhm.
somehow they sell their house and move to anything that's not a single family house, their health's gonna like immediately deteriorate.
Yeah.
Some of them are worried about interfamily relationships because those actually don't get better. They over time, if they're already bad, so most of the time they just get worse or they
Yeah.
get magnified. When my grandma died, I was the executor of her estate. We were real close. We were like best friends.
Mm.
And she and her kids, you know, there was a lot of drama and a lot of fighting and stuff. And that, so so that's going on and that's in the seniors' mind. They just want to have peace and they don't want the family to fight. But those issues don't go away. And then they're also worried about senior housing because they don't understand all the options. It changes a lot. There's new
Yeah.
options all the time. There's innovation in the space, but it's a lot more expensive to live in these places than they've ever paid. You know, even
Yeah.
though you get a butler and you get a, you know, a cleaning person, but to them they just see $5,000 and they're like, oh, it's impossible. How
Yeah.
is that ever going to happen? And But I think it's tough because I think the average stay in a assisted living home is like 18 months or 2 years, depending on what study. So, when you move in, on average, you are kind of starting to say that things are winding down. I don't know how that would be easy for anybody. So
Yeah,
that's what's interesting is like, that's why they don't only care about price, because there's a lot of things racing through their mind
yeah,
that is so much more valuable. And there's the same thing on the private investor side, or if there isn't, anybody who's thinking about investing a deal, because really selling a house is a lot simpler than investing in a deal, because selling a
mhm,
house, not as much can go wrong.
yeah,
You have a title company or an attorney, the deal's either going to go through or not. You can waste time. You might have an opportunity cost. You sold it for less or something than you should have. But for the most part, you're going to end up selling your house and it's going to turn out pretty good. But
yeah,
investing in a real estate deal passively, that is not the case.
yeah,
There's great stories, which is most of the deals, and then there's the horror stories that bubble up. So just as important, senior homeowners have a lot of questions. Private money investors have the same ones, and that's why we
mhm,
wrote the book. And this is one of my students' books, Private Lender Blueprint. But in
yeah,
it, really kind of talks about the things that you want to take a strong look at before you fork over your hard-earned money
mm,
and invest in a deal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, before we go to the private lending, also my mother-in-law, I just actually came back from Toronto, Canada, where my
Okay.
mother-in-law is around there. And yeah, she's 90 years old,
Mhm.
and she lives still in her home that she's been living there for like 25 years or more, probably
Mhm.
more. But it's pretty interesting because one of her, so she's thinking about that. She's thinking about moving right now and kind of like a smaller house, easier to maintain, and all of that. Also, she wants to travel a little bit, come and visit us, like spend the winter here instead of shoveling snow in Canada.
Yeah.
Uh, and now she's so if she had a condo or an apartment, and she can just shut the door, there's a security at the bottom, and then that's it. She's free to go, and she doesn't have to be having any worries and stuff like that. And but her big concern about selling the house is kind of like how to sell it, how to market it, who to sell it for. Does she has to clean up the house? Does she has to renovate, does paint, and all that kind of stuff? And so that's kind of like one of her big concerns is around that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. Anytime that there's a big transaction that happens that you're not intimately familiar with, you don't work in the profession, you don't do that very often, there's a big education gap. And when there's an education gap, like when I taught at a Title I school. So the kids had economic disadvantages, and they struggled academically. A lot of the students that I taught were 1 or 2 years behind, and I taught them algebra. And what I
Mhm.
noticed is when there's big gaps in education, and then you're the person who comes in and fill those gaps,
Yeah,
it a huge difference,
yeah.
because they really appreciate it and thank you, because that stuff was all on their mind. And they see you as the reason why they now no longer have that worry. So it's very
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about private lending. So again, a lot of our investors, they, even though they want to start in single family rentals, maybe some of them, they said they're ready to go to the next level. They really want to go to bigger deals, sometimes multifamily or
Right.
storage facilities. I don't know, but one is another investor I was talking to, is his saying, or his famous mantra was, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you're always short a couple of millions. And that's why you should always be looking for money, always be prepared to look for money, and always work with investors that want to work with you. So tell me a little bit about kind of like how does your private lending, kind of like the book and the program that you talk about, how does that, what's the breakthrough here? Like, what's makes it different than what we already know?
Yeah, great question. So basically, what happened is when I went through the senior book deal, I got a Industry Innovator of the Year award. This actually picture right there, Robert Kiyosaki
No, I was looking at
presented
that.
it to me. So
Congratulations.
yeah, he was there, and it was cool because actually it's a funny story. In '05, I stood in line for like 2 hours to get a copy of his book, and then I fast forward, 15 years later, and we're exchanging books. So I never would have imagined that in a million years. But what happened was an investor in Houston, Texas saw that on social or something, it was a big deal. And they go, hey, and he says, hey, I'm an investor. I knew of him. He's pretty well known. He said, I wrote a how-to book like you're doing, but I wrote it to private investors and it answers all of their questions. And he has he was a police officer before he got into real estate. He has a passion to help people. And he's like, I'm giving it out to the people in Houston, but that's obviously not the whole country. You got your publishing company, kids, there's some way that you could license it out, or we could create a new book. And so that's what we did. We created kind of a new book, and then we licensed it out so that, investors all over the country can plug in, they can give it to folks. And really it's like, I think it's some of the best insurance that honestly both parties can buy, because, there's always a fear when you're an active investor of working with a private money, person, and then for some reason they get uncomfortable or they're not happy with the deal or something was miscommunicated, and then it causes conflict, right? Or you're working with somebody that's just kind of a nightmare and it's like, man, I don't need to work with everybody. On the flip side, there's a lot of private passive investors. They're brand new to this. They're doing the stock market, they rode the wave, they think it's kind of rigged. I think it's rigged, but who knows. I like stuff that's like physical, but whatever. And so they're thinking, man, I want to try something else, but I need to know what I'm doing. And they have a lot of questions like, how do I know if this is a good borrower? How do I know if they're not a con man? How do I know if this is actually a good deal? How am I going to know if I actually get, my principal back? What's the rates? There's so many different questions. And so we felt like it's just the same thing. Instead of just answering them all individually, we can just give them our book, pass it out, they read it, and then if they like what we're doing, they they come back to us and it attracts them. And then if they decide it's not, then that's okay too. It's not for everybody, but there's some, I don't know if there's one or two particular questions that private investors should ask, but I would say that in this book, and you kind of go through the table of contents, probably the most important chapters, if you could say that, would be selecting an ideal investment, because there's, it depends on your goals, and then evaluating the borrower is really important. And I think out of all the different things on a borrower, like, experience, references, business model, collateral, character, we've heard of all this. The one I actually like the most is capacity, because if you lend money to somebody and they don't pay you back, it's one of two reasons. One, they don't want to because they're a scoundrel. But I would argue that the more important one is they can't. So something went sideways in the deal, and for whatever reason, they hadn't thought through a plan B, C, or D. And so they would love nothing more than to make you happy and fulfill their promise, but they just physically don't have the money. And so that's something that when I've heard of, and I've heard stories of investment deals that go bad with great people, it's because that capacity. So I think that's huge. And then chapter 7 in our book is analyzing a deal. You've got to have some basic fundamentals. Otherwise, how do you know that what you're looking at is even real? You don't have to become, full time at this, but really at least knowing some of those basics is important. And then, if you do that, you put the odds probably 80% more in your favor.
Yeah, we do a lot of, a lot of private money borrowing. So we have a lot of private money lenders that are, because they're not that interested in the turnkey. They think turnkey's rentals is a little bit, you still have to deal with a tenant, so they don't really like that. So they'd rather get private money lending. It's clean. We send them a check or a direct deposit every month for their interest, and that's it. They can easily do that out of their 401k. They don't have to do with the 401k. If you want to invest in a rental property, it's a little bit kind of not as clean. And so that's so that we have tons of those. So we do a lot of these private, and also some joint ventures. We actually have a few joint ventures right now that we're trying to fund. But this is so I think this is important. What you're saying too is the capacity to to pay back, to make sure that you have the right returns. And for every deal that they're part of, I mean, we talk about the property, how we're making money. And obviously we have a strong track record over the last few years. We've done over like 300 houses, at least. We do 100 houses a year. So we have a strong track record from that perspective. But yeah, I think this is important. And also when you go to the bigger investors, so now we have some very large investors that are looking to invest like millions of dollars with us. And then the first thing they look at is, well, how you're going to need a lot more deals than what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Can you ramp up? Do you have the process, the operation, the staff, everything to do that, the markets to do that? Can the market support that? So these are kind of like at a higher level, kind of like, bigger questions that they need to be answered. But it's the same also if you kind of scale it down. If I'm a private money lender and I want to invest in John Smith's deal, and I want to invest like in 3 or 4 deals, does he have the capacity to do 3 or 4 deals? And how do I help him out? And how do make sure that I also I'm making my money back, that my capital is preserved.
Right. Yeah, that's all correct. And I totally agree. And that's why there's a lot of compression on rates, because there's a lot more money than there are available deals. And so if you've seen your yields go down and you were private lending at, I don't know, 10%, a few years back or something, and now it's, then it went to 8, then it went to 6. It's not because the other person's trying to rip you off. It's because, I mean, that's the job of, the interests don't totally align. Let's just face it. I mean, the active investor's job is to obtain the capital as affordably as possible to run a profitable business. But what I would argue is that them running a profitable business actually helps their capacity, which if something goes backwards or sideways and they're making more money on the deal, then they have a better opportunity to still be able to recapture that. But yeah, I mean, there's competition. It's a supply and demand thing. And I will tell you that it's been my experience, and then going through the last downturn, not doing a ton of my own stuff, but helping my grandma sell her house after she passed away in that downturn. When there's a downturn, which it happens, it's just natural part of life with excluding government intervention. It's going to happen on a pretty consistent basis. Then it kind of flips. Then there's a lot of inventory. And so, we're talking to a lot of people on this, different kinds of folks on this podcast, but like for us, like the reason I said immediate when we did the private lending book and I started doing this and I started passing it out, my students like Leonard, he's in Seattle, he's passing that out. The reason is because even if there isn't a ton of deals to do right now, having people and building the know, like, and trust is key, because there will be a point where there's going to be some deal flow that unlocks. And when that happens, the investors and the businesses that have secured that private capital, it's a win-win, because they're going to be able to take advantage of deeper discount deals, and then their investors are going to be able to get a return. So, but private lending is kind of one of those, or private passive income is sort of one of those things that most investors and even regular folks like say they want, but anytime you start getting like further down the road, most people really just want stuff right now. They want yield right now. They want active chunks of active income right now. So it takes a really proactive mindset to be raising money. And, now when you know that the deals aren't as plentiful for the future, but that's a good way to do business, and it's just not everybody does that. I don't know why, but you can't make anybody do it. But yeah, that is important. And that's a good question. Like you said, do you have the deal flow or not? And of course you want to say yes, and you want to put it to work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can. And sometimes you can't. And so just having, but if you just lead with education, not a sales pitch, whatever business you have.
Exactly.
And you focus the message on what your ideal prospect really cares about. And you just do your very best to show them all their options, tell them which ones point to you, which ones point to other people. Most of the people that we talk to every week in our home buying business and our publishing business, we can't or don't help. And that's okay. And that's the way every business should be. But we're not like dying for business. They're not sensing like we're trying to talk them into anything. I really try to talk them out of it. And then if they still want to do it, then it's a good fit. And so if you have a business that's like that, whatever
Yeah.
it is. It's a really, really great spot to be in. And I'm just so thankful that I just accidentally, I used to scorn my market. I used to go to these masterminds, and there was people, I have friends who do a lot of turnkey deals in the
Yeah.
space, and they're in, they're in Mississippi, they're in, Indiana, they're in all the places where you can, still get a yield. And I was and their marketing methods were so lame compared to mine. Like I was having to go through 48 different things to get somebody to call us, and they're just basically just sending out some kind of a junky postcard, and they're getting 65% loan to value deals, and I'm having like 14 cold callers in Costa Rica loop back around and text message to get 78 cents on the dollar deals and barely squeeze out a profit. So it's funny because there's the lesson I think for y'all listening is that we really show our character and our best stuff when there's a challenge. Mm-hmm. And if my market wasn't so competitive, I would have never spent 200 hours writing a book. And then it turns out that book, introduced me to Robert, it introduced me to Gene Garino's new book for residential assisted living. He's a big star in real estate. We just published his book. We just did Eddie Speed's book for Note School, and they're licensing.
I know Eddie.
Yeah. We just did his book. It'll be out at the Note Expo, and I'm going to speak at it, and we're going to license it to all of his students. And so I didn't even know what a publishing company was. And now it's turned into this really big thing. So it's sort of like, if things are really tough, so for a lot of business owners, they have been for 18 months, making it through to the other end, sometimes it's like, your best stuff comes there. So it all really worked out. And now my friends in the Midwest who are struggling to get a yield because the game's changed, guess what? They hadn't sharpened their marketing axe because they didn't need to. And so now they're wanting to license the book. And I'm saying, how ironic. Just like Alanis Morissette, little Canadian deal.
Yeah, that's right.
Buddy.
Canadian plug.
Yep. Too much.
Well, so thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Max. I mean, I'm definitely gonna get the seniors book for sure. I'm gonna send it to my mother-in-law. I think it's gonna answer a lot of questions for her. I think it's gonna be extremely valuable, and it's gonna help her, I think, make kind of like the best decision for her moving forward. So really, probably give a copy to my wife as well, and the sister and all of that, make sure everybody's on the same page. But I think this is, so thank you for putting that together. And I think it's pretty unique book. And I don't think I've seen a book like that before. So thank you for writing that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
And then I think you wanted to, you have like a special link for people who wanted to download the book. Is that right?
Yeah. So here's what I've got for you. Just to keep it simple. People ask, well, how do I reach out? How do I get more info? So we've created a new book called the Real Estate Investor Book Writing Checklist, but you don't have to want to write a book to get value from it. It's about messaging. It's about the stuff we've talked about. It's communicating more effectively with the folks that you're trying to reach out to. It's the framework that we use to write all of our books. So some people are like, man, I like this book idea and I want to write a book myself. These are the steps that we use every time we write a new book. We normally charge for the book. It's $9.99. But for the first 25 people, as long as the link's up, I'll make this available. They just go to dealschasingU.com, deals with an S, chasingyou.com/Martel, MARTEL. And so you can download a copy of the book, and then you can kind of look around our website, and you can find some links to reach out to us. So if you want to get a copy of the senior book or the private lending book, whether you're just a passive investor, you just want to know what questions you need to ask, the people that you're reaching out to, like your customers are, they can get a copy of that. If you want to get a copy of the senior book, just reach out to us. We're more than happy to help.
Okay, sounds good. Very good. Well, thank you, Max, for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. So have anywhere else they can reach out to you, like on Instagram or anything like that, or Facebook?
Yeah. Yeah, if they go to Facebook, deals with an S, chasing you.
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah, they just go to that on Facebook. We have our, we have some education videos on there, and it's all good.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everybody. Signing off.
Thank you for listening to Break Away from the Rat Race with your host, Eric Martel. If you want to share your story and experience with our listeners, please message us on Facebook at Break Away from the Rat Race. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes.